Zayden Grant was elbow-deep in freezing pipe water when the ceiling panel above him gave out, dumping a second wave of it straight onto his head. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, wiping his soaked face with the only dry part of his shirt left his sleeve. "Are you okay?" A woman's voice called from behind him. He turned around, crouched on the floor of a sleek downtown office, soaked jeans clinging to his legs, wrench still in hand. And there she was, heels, tailored black suit, and eyes like a thunderstorm about to break. "Yeah," he said, clearing his throat and trying not to sound like a drowned rat. "Pipe's cracked where it feeds into the wall. It's old. Should have been replaced years ago." Tess Varela crossed her arms and nodded, but her eyes stayed on him a second too long. "I inherited the building 3 months ago. Guess I've got more repairs than I thought." Zayden stood, water dripping into his boots. "I'll patch it up. Might hold a few weeks maybe, but you're gonna need a full replacement. It's not a small job." "I'll take care of it," she said, then paused. "Do you have a card?" He pulled a card from his wallet, creased and a little damp, and handed it over. "Call me if you want the work done right." She took it, fingertips brushing his. "I'm Tess, Zayden." Their eyes lingered a beat too long, then his phone buzzed in his back pocket. He winced. "You can take that," Tess said, already turning back toward her desk. "It's my daughter's school," he mumbled, stepping away to answer. Lena's teacher had called to let him know she'd had a small panic attack during reading hour. Zayden's stomach twisted. It had been getting worse lately, her nightmares, the anxiety, the tears when he left for work. He picked her up early, held her hand all the way home, and canceled the rest of his jobs that day. They made grilled cheese and watched cartoons on the tiny couch in their 2-room apartment. He tucked her in early, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Daddy's got you. Always." But when she was asleep, he stared at the overdue bills stacked on the kitchen table. He needed that pipe job. He needed every job. The next morning, Tess called. "I want the full replacement," she said. "How soon can you start?" "Tomorrow," Zayden said, already checking his calendar. "It'll take 2 days, maybe 3. I'll clear the office. It'll be just you and me here," he blinked. "You're staying?" "I work better alone," she said, then paused. "Besides, I want to see how you work." That last part felt loaded, but he didn't question it. When he showed up the next morning with his toolbox and a thermos of coffee, Tess was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, typing away on a laptop. He hesitated at the door. "Didn't recognize you without the heels." She glanced up, half smiling. "Didn't recognize you dry," he chuckled, walking in. "Touché." The next 2 days passed in a blur of copper pipes, drills, and quiet conversations. Tess asked about his daughter, and he told her how Lena was 7, curious, bright, and scared of thunderstorms. How her mom walked out when she was 3, and Zayden had been doing it on his own ever since. Tess listened, really listened. And when she talked, she mentioned growing up in a big house that never felt like home. Her father had passed 2 years ago, leaving her everything: his tech company, his properties, his fortune. She'd taken the office because it felt like hers, not his. But she never said the word millionaire, and Zayden never asked. By the end of day 3, the job was done. The pipes gleamed like new. Tess came back with 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. "You saved my ceiling." He took it, smiling. "You're the only client I've had who brought me coffee. You're the only plumber I've had who fixed more than the leak." They sat on the floor, side by side, the office echoing with silence. Zayden glanced down at her bare feet. "You always take your shoes off at work," she shrugged. "Only when I'm trying to feel something real." He looked at her, really looked at her. "You're not like the other people in these buildings." "Why? Because I don't scream when I see a wrench." "No," he said. "Because you look at people like they matter." Their eyes locked. The air shifted. But just as he leaned the slightest bit closer, his phone rang again. Lena's name flashed on the screen. He stood. Sorry, I have to go," Tess nodded, quickly masking whatever emotion had flickered in her eyes. "Of course." He hesitated, then handed her the invoice. "I didn't charge you for the emergency patch, or the extra hours." She looked at the total and raised an eyebrow. "This is way too low. It's fair. I'm not looking for a discount, and I'm not looking for charity." The silence between them stretched. Then she whispered, "Zayden, would you ever let someone help you?" He blinked. "What? Never mind," she said quickly, folding the invoice. "Thanks for the work." He left without another word. That night, Tess sat in her penthouse and stared at the invoice again. It wasn't the number that bothered her. It was him, the way he smiled at his daughter's photo, the way he never asked for anything, the way her heart beat faster every time he looked at her. She pulled out her laptop, opened a folder labeled Private, and typed his name into a blank document. Zayden Grant. She didn't know what she was doing. All she knew was she was in trouble. Because she was falling for a man who had no idea she was worth millions, and he had already stolen her heart. Zayden didn't expect to see Tess again. The job was done, and people like her didn't usually linger in his world longer than necessary. So when he walked into the community center the following week, tugging Lena's backpack higher on her shoulder, the last thing he expected was to see Tess standing by the front desk, reading over a clipboard. She looked different again, hair in a braid, wearing jeans and a soft navy sweater that somehow made her look even more out of place in the scuffed linoleum room than she had in her office. He paused mid-step. "Tess," she looked up, startled. "Zayden." I didn't expect. Her gaze dropped to Lena beside him. "Hi, you must be Lena." Lena tilted her head curiously. "Are you Daddy's boss?" Zayden gave a quiet laugh. "She's not my boss." Tess crouched slightly to meet Lena's eyes. "I'm Tess. I'm helping out with the art classes this week." "Are you here for those?" Lena nodded, clutching her dad's hand with both of hers. "I like painting animals." "Well, you're in luck. Today we're painting jungle scenes." Zayden looked between them. "You volunteer here." "I do now," Tess said, rising. "I needed something less sterile." She glanced toward the open doors of the art room where a few kids were already dipping brushes into buckets of paint. "Come on, I'll walk her in." Lena let go of Zayden's hand and followed Tess without hesitation, her little footsteps matching Tess's longer stride. Zayden watched them disappear into the room, then exhaled slowly and made his way to the hallway bench. He stayed for the full hour, flipping through an outdated magazine, pretending not to glance at the open art room door every few seconds. When Lena finally came out, her hands were covered in green and blue streaks, and she was beaming. "Daddy, look, I painted a leopard in a tree." He knelt to take the paper from her, genuinely impressed. "Wow, that's amazing." Tess followed behind, wiping her own paint-smeared fingers on a rag. "She's got a good eye for color," Zayden stood. "I can't remember the last time she smiled that wide." "She's bright and brave," Tess said softly. "She told me she wants to be a vet when she grows up." Zayden blinked. "She said that. She said she wants to help animals who are scared. She said it's important they know someone's there." He swallowed hard. She never tells that to strangers." Tess gave him a look he couldn't quite read. "Maybe I'm not a stranger anymore." He didn't answer. Couldn't, not with the way his chest tightened. They walked out together, Lena skipping ahead with her painting held up like a trophy. As they reached the parking lot, Tess hesitated. "Zayden, I was wondering, would you let me take you both to dinner one night, as a thank you for the pipe work, and for bringing Lena today?" He shook his head. "I didn't do anything that deserves a thank you. You fixed something that mattered. That deserves more than a tip." He looked down at his boots, unsure. "It's not that simple." "Sure it is," she said. "It's just dinner." He looked back up. "You don't do anything that's just not the way you look at people, or the way you ask things." Tess studied him, and for a moment the parking lot around them faded, just wind brushing past and car doors clicking shut in the distance. "I'll cook," she said finally. "At my place. Tomorrow night, nothing fancy." He hesitated. "Lena doesn't eat anything with weird sauce. I'll keep it sauce-free." He glanced at his daughter, still twirling in circles near the sidewalk. "Okay, we'll come." Tess smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. The next evening, he stood outside a mid-rise building in a quieter part of the city, holding Lena's hand and a bouquet of lilies he'd picked up from a corner vendor. He hadn't planned on bringing flowers, but when Lena spotted them, she said, "She looks like she'd like those." And he couldn't argue with that. The doorman greeted them by name, which confused him until Tess's voice echoed from the lobby. "I told him to expect you." She wore a soft gray dress, barefoot again, and the apartment she led them into was nothing like he expected. Warm wood floors, a wall of bookshelves, and windows that overlooked the skyline. It looked lived in, safe. Lena wandered to the window in awe. "It's so high," Tess laughed lightly. "Helps me think." Zayden handed her the flowers. "They're not much." They're perfect. She looked at them a long moment before adding, "No one's given me flowers in years." Dinner was pasta, homemade bread, and salad, and true to her word, no sauce for Lena. While they ate, Tess asked careful questions about Lena's school, about Zayden's work, about the best kind of wrench for fixing a garbage disposal. He noticed she never once brought up herself. After dinner, Lena fell asleep curled up on the oversized couch, wrapped in a throw blanket Tess had brought over without a word. Zayden stood beside the window, arms crossed. "You don't have to keep doing this." Tess turned from the sink. "Doing what?" "Showing up, being." "Like this?" "Like what kind?" "Interested." She dried her hands on a towel and crossed the room slowly. "Zayden, I invited you here because I wanted to, not out of pity, not because I feel sorry for you. You don't even know me." "Yes, I do." Her voice was steady. "I know you take care of your daughter like she's your whole world. I know you work harder than most people ever will. I know you fix things even when they're not yours to fix." He looked away. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "I hope not." He turned back to her. "I don't have anything to offer you." Her expression didn't change. "I'm not asking for anything." A long silence stretched between them, then he said, "You're too good at this." "At what?" "Making people believe things they shouldn't." She stepped closer. "And what exactly do you believe right now?" He didn't answer. Couldn't, because every instinct he had was telling him to walk away, and every part of him was already rooted in place. She lifted a hand to his cheek just for a moment, then stepped back. "Stay a little longer," she said quietly. "Let her sleep. We'll have dessert." He nodded. But as she turned to the kitchen, her heart thudded against her ribs because she knew this wasn't simple. Not anymore, and soon she'd have to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just a woman with a nice apartment and a soft voice. She was a millionaire, and she was falling for him. The next time Tess saw Zayden, he had grease on his neck and a gash across his knuckle. He walked into her office without knocking, balancing a cardboard box in one arm and holding Lena's hand with the other. "I need a favor," he said, brushing his hand across his forehead. "I know you've got the space." Tess rose from behind her desk. "What happened?" "Lena's after-school program shut down today. Water damage. No warning. I've got a repair job across town that can't wait, and I can't leave her home alone." Lena looked up at Tess with wide eyes, then glanced around the room like she could already see where the crayons were kept. "I brought her things," Zayden added, nodding to the box. "Books, snacks, her drawing pad. She won't be in your way." Tess knelt beside Lena. "You like being in the office," Lena shrugged. "It smells better than Daddy's truck." Tess laughed. "Then you're officially my assistant for the day." As Zayden headed toward the door, Tess grabbed his wrist gently. "You can leave her here, but I'm not doing this because I feel obligated." He nodded once. "I know." When the door clicked shut behind him, Tess turned back to Lena. "Come on. You can set up by the window. Best light in the building." Lena followed her, settling onto the floor with her markers while Tess returned to her desk, only half focused on the contract drafts in front of her. Every few minutes, she glanced at the little girl humming softly to herself. Absorbed in her drawing, by the time Zayden returned, Lena had built a city out of file folders and drawn a dragon flying over it. Tess was sitting on the floor beside her, helping her cut out tiny windows for the towers. Zayden stood in the doorway, watching them for a moment before speaking. "She give you any trouble?" Tess looked up. "Only if you consider artistic ambition a problem." He lifted the box. "Thanks, I owe you, you don't." She stood, brushing paper scraps off her skirt. "But if you insist, take me somewhere this weekend. Somewhere that's not your truck or my office." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do that?" "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't." He looked at Lena. "You okay with that, kiddo?" Lena shrugged. "As long as there's food involved." Saturday afternoon, Tess waited at a modest lakeside park she hadn't visited in years. It was quiet, bordered by trees with a winding trail that circled the water. She wore a denim jacket and sneakers, feeling oddly exposed without her usual layers of polish. Zayden arrived with Lena in tow, both of them holding ice cream cones. "You bribed her," Tess said as they approached. "Absolutely," he replied. "It was the only way I could get her to wear a dress." Lena twirled once, revealing a cotton sundress decorated with tiny bees. "Daddy said you'd like it." "I do," Tess said warmly. "You look like sunshine." They walked the trail together, Lena skipping ahead every few steps. Tess glanced sideways at Zayden. You ever think about what you'd be doing if life had gone differently? Sometimes, he admitted. I wanted to be an architect when I was younger, thought I'd design skyscrapers, ended up fixing the pipes beneath them instead. Still building things, she pointed out. He gave a quiet laugh. Yeah, just not the way I imagined. She kicked at a pebble. My life didn't go quite how I pictured either. He stopped walking. What you picture? I thought I'd be in Europe by now, maybe running a gallery in Paris. Instead, I'm here pretending to know what I'm doing with a company I didn't ask for. He studied her. Why didn't you go? She hesitated. Because I couldn't walk away from everything and still call myself brave. He didn't answer, but his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. That evening, they sat on a picnic blanket beside the lake, watching the sky turn amber. Lena fell asleep with her head in Tess's lap, her dragon drawing clutched in her hand. Zayden leaned back on his elbows. She's never done that before. What? Fallen asleep next to someone that easily? Tess looked down at the girl, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Maybe she knows I won't let anything happen to her. Zayden's jaw tightened. I'm not used to people stepping in. I'm not trying to replace anyone, I just… She paused, then met his eyes. I care, that's all. He sat up, brushing grass from his jeans. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything, she said. Just don't run from it. They packed up as the sun dipped below the trees. Zayden carried Lena in his arms, her head tucked against his shoulder. Tess walked beside him, silent for a long stretch before saying, There's something I need to tell you. He glanced at her, cautious. Go on. I haven't been completely honest, she said softly, about who I am, about what I have. He stopped walking. I'm not just some woman with a nice apartment, she continued. I own the company that's listed on the deed to this park, and 5 others across the state, and a few overseas. Zayden's expression didn't change, but his grip on Lena shifted slightly. So you're saying you're rich? I'm saying I didn't want that to matter. He looked away, staring at the lake. It does matter. I didn't lie to hurt you. You didn't lie at all, he corrected. You just didn't say anything. I was afraid if I told you you'd walk away. He exhaled, slow and sharp. I might have. Tess swallowed hard, but you're still here. For now. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't press. Because she knew, in that moment, they were standing on a line that could vanish with one wrong step, and if she wanted him to stay, she'd have to earn it. Not with money, not with comfort, but with truth and time. Zayden stood in his narrow kitchen, elbows braced against the chipped counter, staring at the stack of unpaid invoices next to Lena's half-finished cereal. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual, like it was waiting for him to make a decision. 3 days had passed since Tess told him the truth. She hadn't called. Neither had he. He'd gone to work, picked up Lena from school, and cooked dinner with the same rhythm he always had. But something was off. Like there was a space where something used to be. Or maybe where something wanted to be. Lena padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. You're not smiling. He looked over, startled. What? You always smile when you make coffee. You didn't today. He poured hot water over the grounds and set the kettle down. Just tired, baby. She climbed onto a stool. Did you and Tess get in a fight? Zayden paused. Not exactly. She didn't do anything bad, I know. Then why do you look like someone took your favorite sandwich? He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Because sometimes grown-ups don't know what to do when something feels too big. Lena tilted her head. Is love big? He froze. She swung her legs under the counter. Because I think she loves you, and she listens when I talk, and she laughs at your terrible jokes. He turned toward her. You think they're terrible? She grinned. Almost always. He chuckled despite himself, then leaned on the counter. Do you miss her? Lena nodded. Yeah, but I think you miss her more. He drove to the office first. The receptionist said Tess hadn't been in for 2 days, no meetings, no calls. No explanation. Zayden tried her apartment next. The doorman gave him a long look, then finally nodded. She's upstairs, but she told me not to let anyone in. Tell her it's Zayden, he said, and tell her I'm not leaving. The wait stretched long enough that he started pacing the marble floor. Then the elevator dinged. She stepped out slowly, hair pulled back, wearing a faded sweatshirt and jeans. Her eyes were wary. You came, she said. I should have come sooner. She folded her arms, uncertain. Why now? You told me the truth. I didn't know how to hold it. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth holding. I didn't want you to feel small. He stepped toward her. You didn't make me feel small, Tess. I did that myself, because I thought I had to earn the right to be near you. Her voice was quiet. You never had to earn anything. I know that now. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Lena drew this, said it's for you. Tess unfolded the paper. It was a picture of 3 people sitting on a bench under stars. A tiny heart floated above the middle figure. She said it's called us when Dad stops being stupid. Tess laughed, then covered her mouth, eyes shining. She's brutal. She's not wrong. He shifted closer. I let the world tell me what I was worth. I forgot that sometimes love doesn't care about numbers. She looked up. So what now? I want to build something that doesn't leak, something solid with you, if you'll let me. Tess stepped forward, hands reaching for his. I've been waiting for you to say that since the moment you walked out soaking wet and stubborn. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like something he wasn't afraid to lose anymore. She melted into him, her face pressed against his chest. That weekend, she took them both to a quiet inn outside the city, a place with wide porches and a lake that caught the sky in its reflection. Lena fed ducks. Zayden fixed a broken porch swing without being asked, and Tess read aloud from a storybook each night before bed. On the final evening, Zayden sat beside her on the dock, his arm around her shoulders. I never thought my life would look like this, he said. Tess leaned into him. Me neither, but maybe we were both looking in the wrong places. He kissed her temple. I'm not scared anymore. Good, she whispered, because I'm all in. A month later, at a small ceremony in the garden behind the inn, Tess wore a simple white dress. Lena stood beside them with a bouquet of wildflowers and a grin that stretched ear to ear. Zayden held Tess's hands, eyes steady on hers. I never cared about the numbers, she said softly. I just wanted someone who showed up, he smiled. Then you're getting a man who never plans to leave. They exchanged vows beneath strings of golden lights, surrounded by people who loved them, none of whom cared about money, only moments. When Tess kissed her new husband, the wind picked up just enough to carry Lena's voice across the garden. You, but also. Finally, the crowd laughed, and Tess laughed too, her fingers laced in Zayden's, warm and steady. He'd fixed a leak in her office. She'd filled a hole in his life, and together they built something that would never need patching again. 3 months later, the small house in the garden district didn't look like much from the outside. The shutters were faded, the porch needed sanding, and the lawn had gone wild with clover. But when Zayden opened the front door, carrying Lena's backpack in one hand and grocery bags in the other, it felt like everything he'd ever wanted had already taken root. Tess, he called, kicking off his boots just inside the door. In the kitchen, she replied, her voice clearer than the bell above the entry. Lena darted past him, dropping her backpack with a thud and disappearing into the hall. I'm gonna feed Lucky first. Zayden set the bags on the counter and turned to find Tess barefoot, hair pulled into a loose bun, surrounded by half-prepped vegetables and handwritten recipe cards. She wore one of his old flannel shirts over her dress, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. You went to the farmer's market without me. You were on plumbing duty, she said, lifting a sliced pepper. Besides, you take forever choosing tomatoes. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You love that about me. I tolerate it, she replied, tipping her head back against his shoulder. Barely, he kissed her temple. How's the new stove? It's smarter than I am, keeps trying to correct my temperature settings. I can rewire it to stop doing that. She turned in his arms. Or you can let me learn. Her hand slid up his chest, warm and familiar. You know I still haven't figured out how to use 80% of the features in the car you gave me. You said it felt like a spaceship. It does. You want me to teach you? No, she said, lifting her chin. I want the challenge. Zayden grinned and leaned in to kiss her, slow and deep, until the sound of a dish clattering from the hallway made them both freeze. That better not be Lucky in the kitchen, Tess said, pulling away. It's definitely Lucky in the kitchen, Zayden replied, already following the sound. Their rabbit had a habit of escaping the hutch Lena had insisted they build in the sunroom. Sure enough, Lucky had nudged his way into a fallen cereal box and was now surrounded by loops of neon-colored sugar. Lena stood frozen in the doorway. I was only gone for a second. Zayden scooped up the rabbit, brushing cereal dust from its fur. He's a menace. He's an innovator, Tess corrected, laughing as she ushered them all out and closed the pantry door. Later that night, after Lena had fallen asleep with a flashlight tucked under her chin and a library book spread across her chest, Tess and Zayden sat on the porch swing, 2 glasses of wine between them and the spring air curling soft through the trees. Tess looked out at the street, where the moonlight hit the hood of Zayden's old truck just right. "Do you remember the first time you walked into my office? You mean the time I flooded it? You looked like a thundercloud with a wrench, and you looked like trouble I didn't want to need." She rested her head against his shoulder. "You still think that?" "No," he said, brushing his fingers through her hair. "Now I think you were exactly what I didn't know I'd been looking for." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been thinking about something. Should I be worried? Probably. But I'm going to say it anyway." He tilted his head. "Go on." "I want to start something, not a company, not a charity, something for kids like Lena. After-school care that doesn't cost a fortune, art supplies, books, real support." Zayden looked at her, his expression unreadable for a second. Then he said, "You serious?" Completely. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of graph paper. "I've been sketching something." She took the page, her eyes scanning the rough layout of a 2-story building with wide windows and a garden in the back. "You already designed it." "I didn't know what you'd think. Wasn't sure if it was my place to suggest it." She looked up. "Zayden, this is exactly what I needed before I even knew I needed it." They sat in silence, the swing creaking gently beneath them. "I don't think people fall in love because of grand gestures," Tess said after a while. "No, I think they fall in love because someone sees them when no one else does, and stays." He reached for her hand. "Then I'm never leaving." The next morning, they drove out to a corner lot on the edge of the neighborhood, overgrown, lined with cracked pavement, and full of potential. Tess walked the property barefoot, pointing out where the reading room would go, where the garden beds would be, where the mural wall could stretch. Zayden watched her, hands in his pockets, completely in awe. By summer, the first beams were raised. Volunteers came from every block. Lena painted signs for the entrance with glitter and crooked letters. Tess wrote the mission statement by hand. Zayden hammered every nail himself. On opening day, families lined up around the block. Kids poured into the space, touching everything, tugging on Tess's sleeve, asking where the pencils were, what the rules were if they could stay forever. At the ribbon cutting, Lena stood on a makeshift platform and read a short speech she'd written herself. "My dad builds things. My mom makes them beautiful. Together they made this." Zayden blinked hard, swallowing the lump in his throat. Tess reached for his hand, squeezing it once. That night, when the last guest had left and the lights had dimmed, Zayden and Tess stood alone in the main room, arms wrapped around each other as faint music played from a borrowed speaker. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered. "It's more than real," he said. "It's ours." She tilted her face up to his. "So what now, architect?" He kissed her, slow and certain. "Now we build the rest of our life," and they did. With every beam, every morning kiss, every story read under soft lamplight, every scraped knee and school project and whispered promise in the dark, they built something unshakable, not perfect, but solid, and that was more than enough.